Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to T-Ski Tutorials, and this is FPS 1.33. So today we're going to be getting into the door scripts and the cell scripts, or long story short, we're basically going to be creating a map through a system of arrays and for loops. But basically we're creating a map that is going to be saved inside of all of the door scripts, and later on this map will be readable by the enemies so that they'll be able to find the shortest route to find the player. So if you haven't seen my last video, FPS 1.32, I would highly suggest going back and viewing that, because that whole video is just 20 minutes of me talking about the theory of how this whole system is going to work, and I'm going to be referring back to everything I said in that video a lot in this episode. So if you haven't seen that, click in this general area to go see that video, or just search up T-Ski Tutorials FPS 1.32. Alright, so let's actually take a look at what the scripts are going to look like. So let's take a look first at the cell script. Now remember, the cells are just a large flat cube that are going to fill up the space inside of all of the rooms in your game, or just sections of area that the enemies are going to be allowed to walk through. And the cell script itself is only going to remember all of the doors that are in contact with that particular cell, so that the door script can then reference that later and then look when it needs to and figure out all of the doors that are physically in contact with that particular cell. Now, the reason why I didn't write it doors, game object, opening square bracket, and closing square bracket is because that actually gives us a limited array that we can't edit later. So it doesn't really matter that we're not defining exactly what type of variable that is going to be going into this array. Unity will just automatically change it into a game object variable type. But when we write it up like this, in game, then we can change the length of this array and change it to anything that we want to. And this is good because we don't know how many doors are going to be inside of the game. Alright, next we have function ontriggerenter. So for the AIpathCell script, we are skipping function update, and we're only going to be putting our code inside of ontriggerenter. So we have function ontriggerenter other, so this is going to be the variable that is going to save the collider that we had a collision with, as long as that collider is set to be a trigger, and that is of type collider. And then we have inside of here if other.tag equals AIpathDoor doors.push other.gameObject. So basically we're just checking to see if the collider that we collided with, we're going to check the tag that it has, and if it is tagged as a door or AIpathDoor, then we're going to do doors.push other.gameObject. So doors is the flexible array that we have up here that can change in length, and we're going to do the function .push. I believe it'll also work with .add. I'd have to double check that. But basically what this is going to do is just whatever you put inside of the parentheses, it's going to add this at the end of the list. So what we have here is the trigger collider that we collided with, and we're just going to access the game object that is attached to that collider, or rather the game object that that collider is attached to. And then we're just going to save that and put it on the end of the list or the array of the doors. Now remember, this is inside of ontriggerenter, so that means since the cells and the doors are not going to be moving at all, this whole thing is only going to happen once at the very beginning of the scene. Alright, so that is the whole script that we're going to be putting inside of AIpathCell. But the AIpathDoor script is going to be a bit more complicated, as you can see. So first, let's take a look at the variables. First, we have var cells equal new array. So this is going to be just like the doors variable up here, except instead of saving the doors, we're going to be saving cells. And actually, instead of saving just the cells that are in contact with the door, this is going to be all of the cells that exist in our scene. Alright, next we have another array, and this is var doors to cells equal new array. So doors to cells, this is actually going to be saving integers. So this is going to synchronize with this array here, and it's going to save inside of the door script how many doors you're going to have to go through to get to each of the cells in this list here. Alright, next we have the variable immediate cells, and once again, this is an array. And immediate cells is going to save only the cells that are physically in contact with that door. So this is going to be the starting place for drawing our map. So we're going to set all of the immediate cells to 1 inside of the doors to cells array. And then we're going to branch out from there and figure out how many doors you're going to have to go through to get to each cell. So it's very important that we set up immediate cells as an array because we're going to constantly be referring to this in order to branch out and find the distance to all of the different cells. So next we have a variable test for cells, and this is a boolean, and we're going to have it set to true. So this is just a variable that I have set in place just to make sure that we only test for all of the cells and draw up our map and set up all of these arrays only once, because we don't want to keep on doing it over and over again because that would slow down our game. Next we have a variable called wait to test cells, and this is a float when really I think it could be an integer, but either way it doesn't matter. But this is just a number that we're going to use to count down just to make sure that before we actually check and go through this elaborate for loop system, that we actually want to make sure that we have all of the immediate cells in place and that all of the doors have, all of the cells have their door arrays set up. So we want to make sure that all of the scripts have everything needed to set up first. So basically we're just going to have this variable count down and wait about 2 frames just to make sure that everything is all set up and ready to be calculated. Next we have the variable stage. So, if you've remembered in my last video, FPS 1.32, I was talking about how we're going to be going through stages in order to figure out how far you're going to have to go through each door to get to each cell. So stage 1 is going to be the doors that are physically in contact with the door that this script is attached to. And then at stage 2 is going to be the ones after that, stage 3 after that, stage 4 after that. But yeah, so I explained how this all works in my last episode. So if you need to know how the stage system is going to work, once again, make sure you check out my previous video, FPS 1.32. Alright, so the last variable we have is door open, and this is a boolean, and we're going to be setting this to true. So the only time this actually comes into play is if you have doors, as in doors that the player can physically open and close, like we did in, I believe it was FPS 1.29 was the door. It was 20, yeah, was it? No, it was 30. I think it was 30. Well, anyways, so in the video where I showed how to make doors that open and close when the player walks up to them and presses E, we're going to be synchronizing the AIpathDoors with those doors, the animated doors, so that when those are closed, the enemies can't just walk through them. So this is going to be very simple. We're just going to have this be controlled by the animated doors script. And synchronize it with the AIpathDoor scripts just to make sure the enemies can't just walk through walls or walk through doors like that. Alright, first let's take a look at what we're going to be putting inside of function awake. Now remember, function awake is called when this particular game object is first created. So the first thing we do, or we're going to do, is set door open to true. So this is basically just a double check or just a double reassurance that the door is going to be open, because we're going to set up the animated door script to set this to closed if that door is closed. But if there is no door attached to the AIpathDoor, then we want to make sure that it's open so that the enemies can walk through it. Alright, next we're going to set cells. Now remember, this is an array up here that is going to remember all of the cells that are in this scene, and we're going to have it equal GameObject.findObjects with tag, or find game objects with tag AIpathCell. So the way this function works inside of the GameObject class is that it's going to do exactly what it says. It's going to find all of the game objects with the tag AIpathCell and return it in an array, and then we're going to save that array inside of the variable cells because the variable cells is an array. Alright, so next we're going to be modifying the length of this array here, doors to cells. Now remember, up here, doors to cells is the variable or the array that is going to remember the number of doors you're going to have to go through to get to each of these cells. So we're going to set doors to cells dot length, and this is the length of the array or the number of open slots inside of that array, and we're going to have it equal cells dot length. Now remember, cells is all of the cells that are in the scene right now, and when we do dot length, now we have an array that is fully prepared to save all of the number of doors that you're going to have to go through to get to each of these cells, because now our two arrays are the exact same length. So anywhere we go in each of the arrays, we'll be able to say like, hey, this cell game object is going to be this number of doors you're going to have to go through. This cell game object is going to be this number of doors you're going to have to go through. So the two arrays are going to match up with each other. Alright, now our next 3 lines of code are just reassurance to make sure everything works. Just like we have up here door open set to true, it's kind of redundant, but we just want to make sure that if there is no animated door in place for this AIpathDoor, to make sure that this door stays open, we're going to set test for cells equals true to make sure that we actually have this door script game object actually test for all of the cells and set up the map. And then wait to test cells, we're going to set it to 2 once again, and stage to 1. So these 3 lines of code are just to make sure that if these 3 variables up here are changed in the inspector, which it would probably be a good idea to add an @hide in inspector for each of these 3 variables, which I will eventually do. But it's just a reassurance to make sure that all of these variables are set to what they need to be to make sure that this script works. Alright, now before we actually get into what's inside of function update, let's take a look at what is inside of function ontriggerenter, because this is going to be almost identical to what we had inside of the cell script up here. So function ontriggerenter, this is going to happen when our game object enters into a collision with a trigger with one rigid body or more, or one or more rigid bodies attached to one of those colliders. But anyways, so we have the variable other of type collider. So just a simple ontriggerenter function we have set up here. So we're going to do if other.tag equals AIpathCell, immediate cells.add other.gameObject. So I guess I have right here add, whereas up here I have push, but in this case I'm pretty sure add and push are going to do the exact same thing. I can't remember which one's which, but I know one of them will return you the array or the game or the variable that you added to the end of it. But anyways, so we're going to do immediate cells.add other.gameObject. So basically we're going to be saving inside of the variable immediate cells all of the cells that are physically in contact with this door. Now make sure it is ontriggerenter, so this only happens once at the very beginning of the game because these cells and doors are not going to move. Alright, now let's take a look at what is inside of function update. So first of all, everything or almost everything is inside of this if statement here. Let me highlight okay, so here's the opening bracket and here's the closing bracket, and let me highlight it. All of this code here is inside of this if statement, and the if statement is if test for cells, which by default we have set to true, and wait to test cells is smaller than or equal to 0. And we have down here outside of the if statement, wait to test cells minus equal 1. So this is going to just make sure that every frame it is going to count down wait to test cells. So if we're starting at 2 and then it goes 2, 1, 0, that gives us 3 frames of reassurance to make sure that the immediate cells is set up and the doors inside of the cell scripts are set up so that we have all of the arrays available to actually analyze the level and figure out how many doors you're going to have to go through to get to each cell. Alright, so let me highlight everything here. So all of these lines of code that I have highlighted are going to be the lines of code that are going to calculate how many doors you're going to have to go through to get to each cell. And then after all of that is calculated and all of the arrays are all set up and ready to go, we're going to set this variable test for cells to false. And as you can see up here in this if statement, we have if test for cells is true. So if it is now false, then we will no longer run these calculations. So this is just a backup to make sure that we only run through all of this once in our game, because we don't want this running every single frame in our game, because that'll probably slow things down a bit. Alright, so like I said, everything I have highlighted right here is everything that calculates how many doors you're going to have to go through to get to each cell. So we have 2 major for loops, and this for loop here is going to test for all of the immediate cells. So the way this for loop works is var immediate cells game object in immediate cells. So make sure you look closely. This variable right here, does not have an S at the end. So basically this is going to represent the one immediate cell that we are looking at this particular time. And so when we write it like this, every time we go through the for loop, we're going to be able to access immediate cell, and every time we go through it, it's going to go down the list of immediate cells, or all of these cells that are physically in contact with this door. Alright, now we need a for loop inside of that for loop. So remember, every time we go through this for loop, we are looking at a different immediate cell. So we have var I int equals 0 if I is smaller than or equal to cells.length minus 1 I plus plus. So we're declaring a variable I, and we're going to set it to 0 in the beginning. And then we have here at the end I plus plus. So every time we go through this loop, I is going to increase by 1 because of this I plus plus, because I plus plus is short for I plus equal 1. And then we have right here the condition that lets us know whether or not we're going to keep on looping through this. And the condition is if I is smaller than or equal to cells.length minus 1. So we're going to make sure that I goes through the length of all of the cells that are in our game, because each number that I goes through is going to represent a different cell. And so if it is smaller than or equal to cells.length minus 1. Now the reason why I did cells.length minus 1 is because arrays always start on 0, not 1, they start on 0. But the length is actually counting that 0. So if we have an array that is a length of 3, those 3 parts are going to be 0, 1, and 2. So that's why we need the minus 1 right here to make sure we start on 0 in that array. So we have set up 2 for loops. So for every immediate cell that we go through, we are going to check that against, right here, we're going to check that against every cell that is in our game. So we have if cells I in the square brackets. So when we write it like this, whatever I is on, whether that's 0, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth, it is going to return us that game object, or that cell game object, at that place in the list of the array. So when we write it like this and we have the I constantly changing, we are essentially cycling through all of these cells in the cells array. And then we have if it equals immediate cell. So basically we're going through all of the cells and checking on the array that is cells right here. We're going to check to see if any of those are immediate cells. And if any of those are immediate cells, we're going to take the adjacent, or not adjacent, that's the wrong word, but the array doors to cells, and we're going to put the same I in there to make sure that we go to the same spot on that array inside of doors to cells and have it equal 1, because all of the immediate cells are going to equal 1. So now with all of this code set up, essentially all of this right here is stage 1. Alright, so now let's take a look at what we're going to be doing for stage 2 and up. So the number of stages that we actually go through is going to be determined by the length of the array cells, or the number of cells that we have in our game, to ensure that we go through all of the cells and lay them out in our map or in our arrays to know how many doors you have to go through to get to each of those cells. So we are starting on stage 2. So this is a for loop up here, but just like we have up here, var I int 0, the condition, if this condition is true, we're going to continue, and then at the end of each of those for loops, we're going to execute this line of code. We're going to do here, instead of I, we're going to add stage, and at first we're going to set stage to 2, and then if this condition is true, if stage is smaller than or equal to cells.length, and I don't have a length -1 here because stage starts on 1, and since we completed stage 1 here, in this for loop, we're going to be starting on stage 2. So if stage is equal to or smaller than or equal to the length of the array cells, then we are going to continue looping through everything inside of here. And then we have at the end here stage plus plus, just like we have I plus plus, but plus plus is just short for plus equal 1. So we're going to be adding 1 to the variable stage every time we loop through all of this code here. So the condition for this for loop to keep on going is that if I is smaller than or equal to cells.length -1, just like we have up here. So basically we're going to have the variable I start at 0 and go through just the length of the number of cells that we have in the array cells, or it's going to go through, starting at 0, all of the numbers that represent all of the cells inside of the two arrays cells and doors to cells for all of the cells in our current scene. And then of course at the end we have I plus plus, so I plus equals 1 every time we go through this for loop. Alright, so now essentially we are going through all of the cells in our game in stages. So we're starting at stage 2 and we're going to go up from there, and then every time we increase in stage or increase 1 in a stage, we're going to loop through all of the cell game objects that are in our scene, and that is going to be everything. Let's see if I can highlight this right. Everything right here. So let's take a look at the first condition. So if doors to cells I, so we're checking to see 1, if that particular cell has been marked yet, and then if it equals stage -1, or if it had been marked in the previous stage, then we are going to go through this for loop here. So in this for loop, we need to declare a variable called checkDoor, and that is of type GameObject, and we're going to do in cells I, so the all of these cells that are from the previous stage, because that's what we have I synchronized with because of this if statement here. So so if we are in this for loop, we know that cells I is going to be one of the cells from the previous stage, and then we're going to get component AIpathCell and then get the variable from it doors, or remember doors is an array that remembers for each of the cells. It is going to remember all the doors that are in contact with that cell. So next we have an if statement, if checkDoor does not equal GameObject. So this is set in place because at the very beginning, right after we figure out the immediate cells, if we check all of the doors attached to those cells, one of those doors is going to be the door that this script is attached to. So we just want to make sure that we don't compare this door against itself. Alright, next we have a for loop inside of that, and we have var checkCell GameObject in checkDoor dot get component AIpathDoor dot immediate cells. So remember, this for loop up here is going to list through all of the doors that are attached to all of the cells that were marked in the last stage. So then we're going to look at all of those doors and look at the immediate cells attached to those doors and keep track of it inside of a variable called checkCell. Alright, so now we're looking at all of the cells that could possibly be marked as a cell that is marked as whatever stage we are currently on. And so we need to then loop through all the cells in our game and then check to see if those cells have not been marked yet. And if they haven't been marked yet, we're going to mark those cells as the current stage. So we have a for loop and we're declaring a variable j. Now the reason why I use j is because we can't use I, because this for loop is inside of a for loop that is already using I. So we need a different variable to loop through all of the cells that are in our game. So we're going to use j. And we're going to start that at 0. And if j is smaller than or equal to cells.length minus 1, j++. So basically, we're just looping through all of the cells that are in our game according to this array here, and we're going to synchronize it with this array doors to cell. So then we have inside of this for loop if cells j, so the cell that we are currently looking at as we're going through the list of all of these cells that are in our scene, and if it equals checkCell, so the cell we are currently looking at, or the possible cells to be marked for the current stage. So if it equals the cell that we're looking at, and we're going to access the array doors to cells and look at what that cell has been marked at so far, and if it equals null or hasn't been marked yet, we're going to do doors to cells j. So we're going to list wherever it is on the second list and synchronize it so that doors to cells equals the current stage. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything on how to set up this for loop and array system so that we have two arrays that synchronize with each other. So yeah, hopefully that all made sense. So now I'm going to cut the green screen and go into Unity and show you how to do that inside of Unity. Alright, here we are inside of Unity. Now first of all, let's start by making some sort of a maze for our enemies to go through. So I'm just going to duplicate this cube right here because it is already tagged as level parts, has a box collider, and it's just a plain old cube, and let's make a maze out of it. So let's bring it over here, and I'm going to resize it, and I think I'm going to design this maze with low walls that you could jump over, but it's just supposed to be a simulation showing walls that the enemies will have to navigate their way around. So yeah, I don't know, let's just see. I'm just going to keep on duplicating and moving things until I come up with something that I like. So let's start with like an entrance. Let's have this open up into some sort of a room like so. And then I'm going to duplicate that again, bring it over here, then I'm going to duplicate this one. I really have not much idea what I'm doing. I'm just kind of totally making this up. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I should have like done this before the video. But then again, I wanted to create an interactive experience where you get to see every single piece of me making this game so that there's no jumps in how something was made or anything like that. So I guess you're gonna have to just listen to me ramble as I create this maze. I'm going to resize this. I think we should make it a little bit more complicated than that. Alright, I think I'm almost done. Let me just close it off. Alright, that looks pretty good. Just a kind of general maze to just prove that this AI system is working properly. So let's go ahead and save that. And now let's create some materials. So create material, and I'm going to call this cell green, and let's change this to, let's see, transparent diffuse, I believe is the one I'm looking for, and I'm just going to make that a generic green and make it kind of see-through. Alright, now I need to create a cube, so I'm going to focus in on this, move my camera a little, game object, create other, cube, and then, where did I call it? Cell green, drag on top of there. Alright, see-through, that's what I was looking for. And I'm going to simply duplicate it. And now I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this door blue. And let's just change that from a green to a blue. And drag it on top of this one. Alright, you know, actually I think both of those are a little bit too see-through. They're kind of hard to see. So I'm going to put it somewhere around there. Same with the cells. Alright, that's a little easier to see. Alright, now let's add some tags. So let's go to, how do you edit? Project settings, tags, here we go. Okay, so what was it? AIpathCell and AIpathDoor. Let me make sure I spell those the same as I did in here. Oh, no, path was lowercase. So I'm going to try to stay consistent here and change that to lowercase. Okay. Cool, now let's tag these guys. And this is an AIpathCell. And this is an AIpathDoor. There it goes. Why was that so hard to find? Okay. Now I want to first of all make the cell very, very skinny, basically as skinny as possible without it being 0. Oh, there we go. And I want to get it extremely close to the floor, and you'll see why later in some of the later tutorials why it is important to have it extremely close to the floor and have it very thin. But for now, that'll just be a general guideline, I suppose. And let me just start filling in. Actually, you know, I should change all the settings first. So I believe that needs to be a trigger. So we're going to attach a rigid body to this. So components, physics, rigid body. And I'm just going to check is kinematic, I don't know how that word is pronounced. But anyways, so we're just going to just create a rigid body on this just so that our collisions are detected properly. But we don't actually want this cell to move or anything. So we're just going to add an inactive rigid body to it. And now let's move this door. Now the placement of the doors doesn't matter as much, but it still matters a little. The main things about the doors is that they need to be in contact with both of the cells that it is a door between, and preferably you'd want it to be pretty much floating in the middle there so that the middle of this cube lines up with the super flat cell cube I have right here. Alright, and oops, I forgot to set this to a trigger. Oh, one more thing I forgot to set, because let me save it and play it real quick, and I can demonstrate to you. If I go over there right now I can totally see both of these. And I don't want to see these because they're ugly and they're supposed to be invisible. So let's quickly learn how to do that. So we are going to go to layer. So I have my door selected. So layer, I'm going to add a layer. And right here, I'm going to call this AI path stuff. That's a dumb name, but whatever. So I'm going to set this to layer AI path stuff, and as well as the cell AI path stuff. And then if I go up here to layers, you can see I have a check mark next to all of the different things. So if I turn off AI path stuff, now it's invisible. So if you want to do some level design and you don't want to be looking at that stuff, you can go up to layers right here and turn them on and off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to player capsule, main camera, and calling mask. I'm going to uncheck AI path stuff. And then under gun camera, just make sure that the gun camera is still only rendering the gun. Alright, so let's give that a save and run it to make sure that we can see it in our scene view right here. But in the actual game, let me run over there. It's invisible. Sweet. And my player can jump really, really high. So, let's keep going then. So let's create some cells. Oh, I should rename this AIpathCell, and I'm going to rename this one AIpathDoor, and I'm actually going to create an empty, and I'm going to call it AI path cells and doors. And I'm going to take both of those and set them as a child to this, just so that I can keep everything organized in here. So now let's start duplicating. So let's duplicate this, and then let's resize it. So I'm going to make it a little skinnier. For the most part, you really don't have to worry about the cells overlapping each other. From what I've experienced, it actually sometimes works better if you have them overlapping a little, because then you have a little bit more chance that the enemies will do some exploration and move from one room to another rather than just staying inside of one cell. So what I mean by that is if, like, say they're inside of this cell and they're just randomly wandering around and then they cross over into this cell, they're going to make this their new cell and then move around randomly within this one. So it gives just a little bit of randomness to the movement of your enemies. Alright, so let's duplicate this one. You know, I'm going to make that full screen. There we go. That's a lot easier. Alright, that's looking good. And I'm thinking for this little part, I actually am going to want to put a cell inside of. So I'm going to duplicate that and move it right there. And I'm going to have it overlap just a little. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Now let's move on to this room. I'll try to rush this because I know you guys are just watching this video and are probably getting a little bored. So I'm almost done. I just have a little bit more to go. I'm going to try not to worry about getting it perfect, but at the same time, I want to make sure these cells are close to the walls, but not going through them, because the enemies aren't actually going to be detecting the walls. They're just going to stick to the inside of the cells. So if the cells go through walls, then the enemies can go through walls. So we want to make sure that you line everything up neat and nicely as possible. Alright, I think this is going to be the last cell that I have to make. Alright, I think that is it for the cells. Now let's start making some more doors. So I'm going to resize it a bit so that they're easier to see. But the doors should not take nearly as long to set up. I need 2 of them right here because, as you can see, I have, let me separate them a bit more, but I have a cell here, and a cell here. So I want to have a door to go between each of those cells because we got to treat this little area as its own little room, even though it's so small, just this one little area. We still got to treat it as a room. Even if it, like, on its own isn't actually a room, it doesn't matter. The AI it just is the way the AI behaves and such. So yeah. Alright. Alright, now I think I have a door leading between every cell now. And for the most part, it looks like they're all overlapping properly. Okay. No. Alright. So I think that's pretty good. So I think the next step is to create our scripts. So let's start with the cell script. So create JavaScript AIPathCell script. And this one was incredibly simple. Where is it? AIpathCell script. And we're going to delete all of that, even though I'm pretty sure it's going to give me an error when I press delete. Let's see. Oh, wow. It usually does. Okay, well, anyways. So far, there it goes. I knew it. Alright. That's the only time I ever see the error. It never actually occurs in the game, so I don't know why that happens. Doors and equal new array? Is it? I gotta double check my notes. New array. Okay. Okay. And now we're going to do function on trigger enter other collider. And I think we are just simply doing if other dots tag equals AIpathDoor, then doors dot add other dot game object. Let's see if I'm right. Yep. Well, I guess it was push instead of add, but I'm not quite sure which one is which. I remember one of them. Let's search this up real quick. So I'm just going to quickly go to scripting reference and array. Let's just search array. Okay, and then okay, so push will returns the new length of the array, and add doesn't do anything, or it's void. It doesn't return anything. So I guess that's the only difference between push and add, because to the end of the array, yeah, it both adds it to the end of the array. Just push will return you the length of the new array. So in case you're wondering the difference between push and add, I guess that is the difference. So let's give that a test run, make sure that's working. So let's play it. and pause it. And let's select just a random cell. And we forgot to attach the cell script. Dang it. Alright, I'm wondering if I can select all of them at once and then attach AIpathCell script. Please, can I? Okay, that one has it. And, I gotta do it. Okay, this will just take a second. Maybe. Okay, don't. I was trying to make sure I had everything set up before I actually started duplicating them all. But, oh well. Let's see if I got this right. I probably messed one up. Alright, so cell script. This one has 2 of them. Okay, let's remove one of those. Okay. This one also has 2. Alright, sweet. Now we're going to need to eventually do the same thing to the doors. Awesome. Alright, well, we'll do that when the time comes. But let's test out these cells. So, the cell script. Why is the array not showing up? I don't think it shows up in the inspector when you write it like that. So let's just quickly add in function update debug.log doors. And let's see how it looks when we do that. Alright. It looks like it's logging the doors pretty well. But for this case, it doesn't look like there's any way to check to see whether or not it's correct. So we're just going to have to assume that the doors that they are saving are correct, because we know that they are saving doors. So yeah, now let's go on to the AIpathDoor script. So new JavaScript AIpathDoor script. Whoops, okay. And let's drag and drop this on top of all the doors. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Was that 6, 7, 8? All right, let's see if I got it. Okay. Sweet, first try. Awesome. Okay, let's edit the door script. We're still in the cell script. Okay, there we go. So let's start with our variables, and I believe the first one was cells. And equal new array. I believe that was it. Let me check. Yep. Doors to cells, immediate cells. You know what? I'm going to just copy and paste it since I already talked about all of this. And this video is going to be very long anyways, so I'm going to do what I can to make it shorter. So in case you are skipping to just the screen recording of this video, let me go over what all of these do real quick. So the cells is going to save all of the game objects that are the cells or the green cells. The doors to cells is going to be an array that is going to synchronize with this array that is going to save the number of doors that you're going to have to go through to get to each cell. Immediate cells are going to be the cells that are physically in contact with the door that this script is attached to. Test for cells is a true or false variable that we're just going to turn false once we've already tested for all of the cells and actually figured out how far away each of them are. so that we don't have to keep on testing it over and over again every frame and slowing down the game. Wait to test cells is just going to be a number that is going to count down just to make sure that all of the immediate cells, or the immediate cells array, is set up, and so is the doors array inside of the cell script. So wait to test cells is just going to make sure that we've waited a few frames just to double check to make sure that's all in place. And then stage, like I talked about in my last video, are going to be these stages that we are going to have to go through to see how far away each of those doors are. And then door open is just going to synchronize our game with, whoops, let me find it, this actual type of door, an actual door that you can go and open and close and walk through, so that we can synchronize this type of door with this type of door so that enemies don't walk through a door. And we will be setting this up later, but for now we're just going to set it to true. So now let's do our awake function. Alright, and once again, I'm going to be lazy, and I'm going to copy and paste everything inside of the awake function. And I'm just going to explain what everything inside of here does. Alright, so door open equal true. So we have up here the door open that determines whether or not the door is open and synchronized with another door. So this is just a just to make sure that the door is open in case for some reason you accidentally change this in the inspector or something along those lines, just to make sure the door is open. And then if we do synchronize a door, and we would do that through the door script here, if there is a door, it will then turn open or door open to false if it is not open. And then we have here cells equal game object, and this is capital because it's a class, because we're not referencing any specific game object. And then we're going to do dot find game objects with tag, and we want to make sure that little s is in there, and then it's find game objects with tag, because this is going to return us an array of every game object in our scene with this tag, and we're saving it inside of this array here. And then we have doors to cells dot length equal cells dot length. So now we have an array up here that just has one empty space for every cell that is in our scene, and later we will be saving integers inside of this array to save how far away or how many doors you're going to have to go through to get to each cell. Test cells we're going to set to true, just in case you set it to false in the inspector, which we will hide in the inspector later for testing purposes. And same with wait to test cells and stage, because these need to be these numbers. So if you change them inside of the inspector, then it'll mess things up. So yeah, now we have everything set up inside of the awake function. And now I think before we go to the function update, we're going to do function on trigger enter. And I believe we are going to do a very similar thing as to what we did over here, except instead of testing for AIpathDoor, we're going to do AIpathCell. So I believe if, oops, I forgot one important thing. I need to do other collider in there. So if other dot tag equals AIpathCell, then immediate cells dot add other dot game object. and you want to make sure game object here is lowercase, because we are saving the game object that the collider, that is the trigger that we collided with, is attached to. So basically it's saving the game object that we had a collision with. So let me double check my notes, make sure I got that right. Yep, looks like it. Okay. And then once again, I think if we play the game, we didn't get any errors, but if we select a door, we can't see any of the arrays in the inspector. Is there a place we can go to look at these arrays? Maybe it's inside of gizmos. No, nope, none of that stuff. Oops. Stats? No, definitely not. Maybe if I go change this, oops, no, where was it? If I change it to, is it up here? Debug? Can I see the arrays now? No, I still cannot see the arrays. Is there a way to see the arrays? Hey, that rhymed. Oh well. Alright, let's change that back to normal mode. And I wish there was a way I could see those arrays. But I guess I'm going to have to live with not seeing them. And I'm deleting this because the only thing inside of function update is it's logging a list of all of the doors, which we don't need anymore. I just wanted that to be in place just to make sure that we're saving the doors correctly. So yeah, now I guess we are ready to go inside of function update. And I believe first of all, let's set up the if statement to actually check for the doors. So if, what was it? I believe test for cells. If test for cells and way to test cells is smaller than or equal to 0. So if test for cells and weight to test cells is smaller than or equal to 0. Opening bracket, closing bracket, and weight to test cells minus equal 1. Alright, so now we have an if statement just to make sure that everything that happens inside of here, oh wait, no, we need one more thing, test, whoops, for cells equal false. Okay, now we have an if statement set up to make sure that everything that I put where my cursor is now is only going to happen once, and it's not going to happen for at least 3 frames while we wait to make sure that this array is in place and this array is in place. So now let's take a look at what that code is that we're going to be putting inside of there. So first we need this for loop system right here. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. I'm just going to be lazy. But I'm going to explain what all of this does, of course. Alright. So for var immediate cell, and remember there's no s at the end of this variable, and we're declaring this variable just for this for loop, and it is of type game object. So, and when we write in like this and have an array right here, so this is immediate cells with an s at the end. So this is the array that we set up down here that is going to save all of these cells that this door is in contact with. So when we write it like this, this variable is going to be switched out with everything that is inside of this array, one after another, every time it goes through this loop. So the first time we go through all of this here, immediate cell is going to be the first item on this list. The second time we go through it, it's going to be the second item on this list, and so on and so forth. And then we have a for loop inside of that it's another different kind of for loop. We have, we're declaring a variable I, and it is of type integer, and it's going to equal 0. And then this for loop is going to continue on as long as I is smaller than or equal to cells.length minus 1. Now the reason why we did cells.length minus 1 is because the arrays always start at 0. They don't start at 1. But if we're measuring the length of the array, so let's say the length is only 1, but the first item on the list starts with 0, so the first item is going to be 0. So we need to minus 1 because there's only going to be one item that is 0. So yeah, we need that minus 1 there. And then we have I++, which is short for I plus equal 1. Sorry. So next we are going to loop through every single cell that we have saved inside of this array here, which is all of the game objects with tag AIpathCell. So if cells I, so when we write it like this, we're starting off with 0. So when it's 0 and we have essentially 0 written in here, we're looking at the first item on the list that is the array cells. And if it equals immediate cell, or the game object that we are currently looking at inside of the list immediate cells, then we are going to do doors to cell I. So since we have the same variable inside of here and inside of here, we know that we're going to change the right number item on the list, and we're going to have it equal 1. So essentially this all right here is stage 1, and saving just the immediate cells and setting them all to 1 inside of the array doors to cells. So now let's go to the second one, and once again, because I don't really have this memorized, because this is a lot more complicated code than I usually teach in these tutorials, I'm going to just copy and paste it and explain what everything here does. So we're going to have a for loop, and it is going to be just like this type of for loop here, where we declare a variable and then we have a condition. So if this condition is true, we're going to continue to loop, and then an action that we perform every time we loop through this for loop. So we have here stage equal 2. So we don't need to declare stage because we have it declared up here. And we're going to have it equal 2 because we just went through stage 1 right here. And then we are going to do if stage is smaller than or equal to cells.length. Now we could say if stage is smaller than or equal to 1,000,000 or something like that, and then our game would be safe for if you have 1,000,000 cells in your game and a really complicated maze. But there's no point in going that high up. The most you will ever need is the number of cells that is actually in the game. So we're just going to do cells.length simply like that. And then that will be enough times that we went through stages to make sure that we found all of the cells. And then we're going to do stage ++, which is short for stage plus equal 1, so that stage increases by 1 every time we loop through all of this. So now we have a for loop inside of that. And this for loop, we're writing first I equals 0. Now we don't need to declare the variable like we have up here, because once we declared the variable up here, the variable I is now declared inside of all of function update. So we're just going to set I back to 0, and then if I is smaller than equal to cells.length minus 1, just like we have up here, because we want to loop through all of the cells and find all of the cells that we found in the last stage. And then I++, so we're going to increase I by 1 every time we loop through everything in here. So now we have if doors to cells I equals stage minus 1. So basically we're going through all of the cells And then we're looking at the synchronized array right here, doors to cells, and we're finding all of the cells that we found in the previous stage by simply writing stage -1. So now essentially everything in here, we have now found all of the cells that were found in our previous stage. So now we're going to go through all of the doors that we made inside of this script here. So all of the doors that are attached to those cells that we found in the last stage. So we're doing var, we're declaring a variable checkDoor, and is going to be of type GameObject, and it is going to be in cells I. So we're going to, because we know that doors to cells I equals stage -1, so as we're looping through all, or as we're increasing I by the length of the number of cells in the game, so we're looping through all of the cells in the game, since we know that I, or the one, or the item on the list is from the previous stage, we are looking at the current cell that we are looking at that we just figured out is from the previous stage. And then we are going to get the component AIpathCell, so we're going to get the script that is attached to that particular cell, and we're going to get the array doors to find all of the doors that are attached or touching that cell. And now we have inside of there an if statement that is if checkDoor does not equal GameObject. So this is just an if statement just to make sure that the door that we now just found isn't the door that is or that this script is attached to. So this is really only going to come into play pretty much once throughout this whole equation as it's looping through all this stuff. But yeah, that's just a double checker thing there. And so now if we figured out that the door is a different door than the one that we are currently looking at, we're going to go through another for loop, and we're going to do var checkCell GameObject in checkDoor.getComponent AIpathDoor.immediateCells. Okay, so we're declaring a variable called checkCell. It is of type GameObject, and we're going to have checkCell loop through everything that is inside of, and now we have checkDoor because we're looping through all of the doors that are attached to all of the cells from the previous stage. So as we're looping through that, I lost track of where I was. Okay, so since we are looking at, as we're going through all of those doors, we're going to access the scripts that are attached to all of those doors, and we're going to access the array immediateCells, and we are going to have checkCell loop through that list, and then we are going to put that inside of one more for loop, and I believe, yes, this is our last for loop. So now inside of this for loop we have var j int equals 0. Now we could I should have gotten a glass of water before this tutorial. Anyways, so we're using j right here because we needed another variable, and up here we are using I already, so we can't use the same variable inside of the same for loop, so we needed a different letter, so I chose j. So we're just declaring the variable j, and it's an integer, and we're starting it at 0, and if it is smaller than or equal to cells.length -1, then we are going to run all of this, and every time we do run through it, we're going to increase j by 1. So if cells j, so if it is an immediate cell from the door that was found from the previous stage, or these, okay, wait, let me restate what I just said. Okay, so we just found all of the cells from the previous stage, and then we found all of the doors attached to those cells, and now we're looping through all of the cells that are attached to those doors. and that's what we're looping through right here. Or I mean, I guess really we're looping through all of the cells in the game. But if it equals check cell, so now we are within this array. So we found the cell that we are checking currently right now, and we're finding it on this list here. And if that cell has not been marked yet inside of the array doors to cells, then we are going to mark that cell as the current stage. And so we have doors to cells, J equals stage. So yeah, hopefully that all made sense, and I believe that is all the code we need. So let's just go ahead and run it to make sure we don't get any errors, and I already have an error. And oh, AIpathCell script. Forgot to add the word script onto these. Script. Whoops, nice. Alright, now let's see if we get any errors. Alright, doesn't look like it. Alright, so I think everything is actually set up and working, but the only problem is that we have no real confirmation to make sure it's working. But the best confirmation that I could find was to do this, which is debug.log was it doors to cells. So now when we log that, we should be able to go into Unity, play it, pause it, and as you can see down here, we have a bunch of lists of numbers, and you can see they are all integers. There is the same amount of numbers in all of these lists. So essentially what's going on is each of these lists that I am selecting here belongs to a different door, and it is a list according to that door, every cell in the game, and how far away each of those cells are away from that particular door. So yeah, that is for right now until we actually program some enemies into our game. That is the best confirmation to make sure that everything is working. So yeah, hopefully that all made sense. You might have to watch this tutorial more than once because I know that this has been a very long tutorial and a very complicated one. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Stay tuned for my next episode where we will be going over how to make an enemy that is going to essentially read this map that we just made. So all of this that I'm highlighting, or everything that you see inside of the console right now, is essentially a map of how to get to anywhere in the level based on the cells. So in our next episode, we'll create an enemy that can read this map. And the code to read this map is a lot simpler than the code to make the map. So yeah, I guess until my next episode, I'll see you guys later, and keep making games.